Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. On behalf of Library Director Christian Zabriskie and Board of Trustee Co-Presidents Dr. Lauren Wells and Ms. Aisha Cooper, welcome to the Newark Public Library's James Brown African American Room. My name is Dale Colston, and I'm Assistant Director for Special Collections here at the library. This evening, we're delighted to welcome Dr. Katie Singer as she shares her fascinating work, including excerpts from Alien Soil, Oral Histories of Great Migration, Newark. I think a few of us here and online have Great Migration Newark stories. I certainly do. My great-grandmother, Louisa Christmas, was born about 1867 in Warrenton, North Carolina. Louisa married Hicks Woodson, an Appomattox, Virginia native, in 1889, and they began their journey north. The first stop was Baltimore. By 1900, Louisa was a dressmaker living at 13 Scott Street here in Newark. She also lived on Vesey Street, Prince Street, Springfield Avenue, and 47 New Street, which is just a 10-minute walk from here. By 1930, she was living in Brooklyn with son Edwin Woodson until her death in 1943. So surely many of you have Great Migration Newark stories as well, and please continue to research and share them with your friends and family. We enjoy this wonderful partnership with two community partners, the Newark History Society and NJPAC. So at this time, please join me in welcoming Associate Producer of Community Engagement for NJPAC, Daniela Fonseca.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dale, for the sweet introduction. I want to thank you, everybody, for being here and for this partnership that it's so important for us and always brings such important issues and debates and panels for our community in person, and the ones that cannot come here, they are able to be a part of it on our stream. And I want to share with you some of the events that NJPAC is having this coming week and in April. Tomorrow, we're going to be here in the library at 4 p.m. We have a program called Pearls of Wisdom. That is a project that involves the kids from First Avenue Elementary School here at Newark and our Elder Advisory Council. And it's a program that brings the generations together, and the kids then are expressing their elders through arts, dance movements, and paintings and visual arts. So that's here tomorrow at 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. Please come. It's a free event. Then on April 16, we'll have a very important event too at NJPAC, and it's also free. I have more information about it at NJPAC table right in the back there. It's going to be the race for New Jersey governor. So we're going to have a panel with the candidates, the 6 candidates, and that's, as we all know, it's a very important election. We are only one of the 2 states that are going to have the elections for governor. So please come join us, have your questions, have all your important remarks. We wait for you all at NJPAC. That's April 16. It's a Wednesday at 6:30. And the last program I want to talk about, it's Ailey Day. It's on May 3rd, and it's a dance class program. It's free for everybody, all ages, all levels. We're going to have 11 different class genres at Arts High, and then we all come to NJPAC to perform and present, and it's going to happen our brand new Chambers Plaza that it's going to be available for all of us for this summer. So thank you so much. And now I would like to introduce George Robb from Newark History Society, and thanks for being here.
Well, thank you all for coming out on this freezing cold spring day. Before I introduce our speaker, who we're very happy to have here, just a couple announcements about some upcoming programs that the Newark History Society is co-sponsoring. One is a book just hot off the presses, A History of the Newark Public Library, where we are right now. It's from the Images of America series. Written by William Peniston, the former retired librarian from the Newark Museum of Art. And there's going to be a launch of this book here at the Public Library on April 23rd at 6 p.m. And we'll send out an announcement about that to the Newark History Society on our to our members, just to remind you about that. But keep that in mind. And then also, there's going to be a whole series of events for a week in late April and early May that some of you may know something about. That are around a dedication of a historical plaque on May 3rd at NJ PAC to honor Cujo Bonquante, who was a Black Newarker, an enslaved man who fought as a patriot in the American Revolution, was emancipated, opened up a gardening business here in Newark. He's the first known Black business person in Newark. And so the historical marker honoring his legacy is going to be dedicated on Saturday, May 3rd. But in the week preceding that, there are going to be a number of events. So there's going to be some bus tours of related to sites that were places where Cujo lived and worked in Newark, as well as historic sites relevant to the African-American history of Newark. So some people have already signed up for this from the Newark History Society, but if you go on to the webpage for the Newark History Society, if you just Google Newark History Society, that'll come up. And if you click on Cujo, you'll see this list of events. And if you want to sign up for the bus tours, just click on that and sign up. It's completely free, but you do need, the seating is limited. So if you're interested in that, sign up. What also might be of interest to people for the Newark History Society is on May 1st and 2nd, there's going to be a two-day history symposium at Rutgers, Newark, on the theme Revolution to Reparations, the Black Experience in New Jersey. There'll be a lot of interesting panel discussions on, especially focused on public history. So again, you're all welcome to that. We'll be sending some information out about that pretty soon. And again, there's no charge for this, but you'll need to register because seating is limited. Okay.
Hey, George. Sorry. Sorry about that. So we just wanted to make sure people knew that there are books for sale back here
Yes,
at the
and
NJ
I was
Pack
about
Day.
to say that.
Oh,
So,
sorry.
but yeah, thanks for stealing my thunder, Tom. So now the good part of the program, and that is our speaker, Katie Singer, who we are very happy to have here, right? Katie Singer has a PhD in American Studies from Rutgers University, Newark, and an MFA in creative writing. She relocated from New Jersey to California in 2020, where she teaches writing and boxing while working on her next book based on Los Angeles' Great Migration era. Her book, Alien Soil, which there are some copies for sale in the back, has just come out with Rutgers University Press, and she's going to be talking about that tonight. There are also some postcards. If you're unable to buy the book tonight, take one of these and you can order it later or tell your friends about it. So the book Alien Soil, Oral Histories of Great Migration, Newark, came out in August 2024 with Rutgers University Press. Katie has also co-authored the memoir of a previously incarcerated writer with Lived Places Publishing. And the book is entitled The Darkest Parts of My Blackness, A Journey of Remorse, Reform, Reconciliation, and Revolution. Revolution/evolution. So please join me in welcoming Katie Singer. Start on me at a microphone, and we'll come around and give it to you. And we need microphone because, in addition to all the computer, that's the only way. 16 now already. So the number is up. So that's the only. Thanks a lot.
Don't apologize. Thank you, George. Put my timer on here. Good evening. Thank you. I love being in Newark where people say good evening back. In LA, people don't know how to do that. And you just stand there. I am so grateful to be here for 1,000 reasons. Sorry, I just feel very thanks. Didn't plan to. I just love this city, and it's done so much for me, and I am so grateful that I was able to hear these amazing stories of Newark and to put them into a book. And I just want to be so clear about the title. As you can see, it's not me telling the stories. I don't know. I didn't live the Great Migration. These Newarkers did. And so I'm really good at giving context and framework, but I'm in the background. The important part is their voices, right? Well, I'll get off my soapbox. For too long, Black history gets told by people who haven't lived Black history. So I'm not telling that history. I'm just putting it on the page for people to read. So I want to thank people, of course, now that I'm done crying. So the Newark History Society is just amazing. I mean, you hear all these events, and it's like you just want to go to everything. Newark has such great history, and we have all these organizations doing these amazing events, NJPAC, the library, Newark History Society. So of course, I'm so excited to see Tim here. Major shout out to all librarians, especially the librarians of Newark Public Library, and especially Dale and Tom. There's nobody who does Newark research who doesn't owe like half their life to these folks. And then thanks to Danielle for doing all this work and getting us live streamed, which for a zillion reasons is so important. So I'm really grateful that folks can access these stories. And what's happening? And sort of my whole point here is I'm selling this oral history collection because I want people to go listen to it. That's, really kind of my raison d'etre. Okay, I'm gonna, oh, and thank you to Rutgers Press, obviously, Rutgers University Press, took a chance on this information that I was sharing, but they just are really invested in Newark history as well. So props to them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, but only to let you know what's in it and about the oral histories. So I'm pushing the arrow. There we go. Oh, oh, okay. I guess that's okay. Nope, don't do that. Should I push the arrow again? Comme ça? Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to talk about my book, but obviously the stories within the book are what I'm here about. So I just wanted to explain the title. It comes from a quote by Richard Wright, who wrote, amongst many things, Black Boy, which was a memoir of him coming from the South to the North. And you'll probably recognize another phrase in there from another book title, but he writes that I was leaving the South to fling myself into the unknown. I was taking a part of the South to transplant in alien soil, to see if it could grow differently, if it could drink of new and cool rains, bend in strange winds, respond to the warmth of other suns, and perhaps to bloom. And so most of you probably recognize Isabel Wilkerson's title, The Warmth of Other Suns, a fabulous Great Migration book. And she takes a few voices of people going all over the place during the Great Migration and tells their story. And so mine's sort of this kind of mirror of 107 voices, that's how many are in the Krueger-Scott Oral History Collection, and looking really at Newark. Of course, applying some of these stories and understandings to the state of New Jersey and to our country, but foregrounding Newark, which deserves way more foregrounding in US history than it gets, even with all the work that these folks I just mentioned are doing. So briefly, my story. So here's the website for the oral histories and I'm going to talk about kind of the origin of the oral history project. So quickly, I was an American Studies graduate student starting the summer of 2011. I'm a late bloomer, in case you can't figure out. I meet my fellow grad student, Samantha Boardman, who's one of the most fabulous friends, scholars you'll ever meet. And I don't know where she is. If anybody knows her, I always say, please let me know. So she finds the cassette tapes of all these oral histories in shoe boxes in the library. And because she's that person, she says, okay, we got to at least get these digitized so they won't just, crumble, because cassette tapes crumble. So I and a bunch of other folks got to digitizing these. And of course, I knew nothing about digitizing. I didn't even know that was a word, but I helped you record stories while you're doing it. So you're always taking notes. You're listening to the interviews over and over and over again. Well, I mean, I don't know how anybody couldn't, but I fell in love with these stories, with these people, with their voices. And I thought, my God, nobody knows these stories. They were recorded, but then they were supposed to, and I talk more about this in a moment, go into this Black Cultural Center that never happened. So anyway, my dissertation was decided. So the Oral History Project, it was initiated by Dr. Clement Price and his colleague and historian Giles Wright, two just fabulous people that are here no more physically, but will probably never leave us. So they put together this oral history project, and one of the really interesting things about it is they had peer interviewers. So that means folks who knew each other were interviewing each other. So a lot of times in oral history projects, some of you might know this, professional, oral historians or scholars or community activists will go into a community and ask questions. But instead, there were trainings for people who lived in Newark to interview each other. So people who were interviewing often were interviewed. So it's this really interesting, unique project where people knew each other, and you get all kinds of amazing conversations about that, because the interviewer will be like, yeah, but remember when we did that? And they're like, oh, that's right. So it's really different. So this was 96, 97 that these interviews were taking place, just to give you some framework. And really what I hope happens with this book, yeah, I mean, I want to sell it. That's great. I'd love Rutgers University to sell books, and I would like any book about Newark to sell. And what I really want is this oral history collection, which is now digitized and on, you can see the Rutgers Library website, to have more attention paid to it, and therefore for people to get excited enough to give money enough so that we can get finding aids, so that you all, for example, in this room can look up, trains or your auntie or a neighborhood or food. There are no finding aids right now. I'm kind of the finding aid, and that's not okay, right? That's not accessible public history. So yeah, so if anybody knows, we've all tried and we're going to keep trying to just make this more accessible. But you can go on right now and just sit down and listen to an hour, 2-hour interview. Maybe you know some of these people, maybe you're related to some of these people. That's just, they're just such valuable stories. So in the book, the way I do it is probably a little different than a lot of, I'm not a very conventional historian, part because I'm in American studies, and part because I was really old when I started doing this. So the book's made up of a prologue and then 4 chapters. The prologue explains what the Great Migration is, because not everybody knows what it is. Maybe everybody in the room knows, but maybe you don't. I have talked to people who are like, oh, right, the Great Depression. It's like, yeah, no. So just knowing what the Great Migration is so important. So I introduce it through the art and words of Jacob Lawrence, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. Chapter 1 is the Krueger-Scott Mansion, which is, in the terms of this book, the Black Cultural Center that never was, and the saga behind it. Chapter 2 is called Sundays. It's how folks spent their Sundays. Chapter 3, Work Days, just about being employed, but also not just paid employment, just all the work that people did to stay employed, to keep up their community, et cetera. And then finally, Chapter 4 is Hot Days. So it's stories of fire, urban fire, residential fire, life and memory of fire, and then finally, the rebellion. and we'll talk more about that in a minute. So in case you're not familiar with the Migration series by Jacob Lawrence, this was the first panel. He painted in the early 40s, late 30s, 60 paintings altogether, and he called it the Migration series. And it's all about the stories that he heard from his family and family friends about what it was like to leave the South and go northeast. And remember, folks went west too. So in the prologue, I use the captions to kind of narrate what the Great Migration is. Who better to do that than somebody who knows it so well? So each of the captions are like this, very simple, but say so much, and they go along with these gorgeous paintings. Jacob Lawrence, by the way, is born in Atlantic City. People associate him with Harlem, but he's a Jersey boy first and foremost. So that's, I know, it's important. So I rely on this series to just explain what the Great Migration is. Again, better he than I, right? And I'm going to be using this in his art in the presentation as well. In 1993, by the way, he retitled the series from The Migration of the Negro, right? It was the 1940s, to the Migration series, and he changed some of the language in the captions. And it's just an excellent way to understand the Great Migration. Right now, the exhibit is broken up into two. I believe in DC, there's one at the Phillips and one half at MoMA. But a couple of times, they've gotten the whole thing together. I think MoMA had all 60 a little while back, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And it was just, I mean, it's just like the greatest story, in my opinion, ever told about our country. So. I really encourage you to look it up online, Migration Series by Jacob Lawrence. So, chapter 1, the mansion. There are probably people in this room who know as much, more, and different than I do. That's always the great thing about talking to people in Newark, because y'all are sitting here with information and knowledge and experience that certainly I don't have, and maybe even that's different than some of the stories shared in the oral histories. So the quick review of the mansion, just in case people aren't familiar with its history, is Herr Krueger, German immigrant, poor, makes tons of money in the beer business. By the way, the first beer in beer cans, I thought that's interesting. He invented that. In Newark, goes to the Freemasons. Again, this is all discussed in the book with a little more detail than I'm giving now. Sells it to the Scottish Rite Freemasons. They are in there for a while having meetings, events, etc. They sell it to Madame Louise Scott, and we'll talk more about that. I don't know why my last picture is upside down all of a sudden, but there it is. That's too bad. And then there is an era of the mansion where it is in disrepair. There are different stories about that. I share a story based on primary sources that I believe explains why the mansion was in disrepair for so long. And by the way, there are so many great photographs in the book, in my presentations. Why? Thanks in large part to Newark Public Library. I don't know if you all are aware of the treasure trove of images that this library has, both physical and digital, and they are so helpful. So if you're looking for somebody or something, please ask the library, because they will tell you, or they will tell you where to look. They're magical. So I just want us to remember what we have here, and at a time where libraries, museums, and so on are being threatened in all sorts of ways, it's a really good time to walk into the library and use it and tell people you're glad that they're there. So another great way to understand Newark's Great Migration, and especially the inimitable Madame Louise Scott, is again Samantha Boardman, who at this point is a doctor as well. did a two-part film, and it's on YouTube. You can just search that. And there are lots of nice primary source photographs. There's an interview with Madam Louise Scott's daughter, Reverend Scott Roundtree, councilwoman at large now. So it's just a really, it's a good 10, maybe more years old, but it's a really lovely film. And again, it's accessible to anybody who can go online. And so sort of quickly, the conclusion to the mansion today is probably all of you or most of you know is it's a maker space. Their brand name is Makerhoods. So there are businesses and people live there, and the good news is it's finally been preserved. I mean, I'm always going to be a little cranky that it's not a Black cultural center, but nobody asked me, so. And so that's sort of the first chapter, which is the Krueger-Scott Mansion. Second chapter, Sundays. So as Jacob Lawrence writes, for the migrants, the church was the center of life. Obviously, Sundays are about church in Newark, but not only, and not all the same. So obviously a lot of churches are featured in these oral histories. And I'll explain that Kathy Lennox Hooker, who headed the oral history project directly, was a member of Bethany Baptist Church. There might be some Bethany members here. And so in oral history, we call it a snowball effect. So she asks some people in the church, they get some more people. So you tend to have kind of a group from one place. But saying that, there were many other churches represented, as well as folks that didn't go to church. One of the amazing things about oral histories is that they remind you that not all people of one race, age, zip code do things the same way, right? So when people talk about the Black community, for example, I have a really hard time with that because there is no such thing when you think about it in an individual fashion. So there were folks who really, church was really important, others not so much. One of the things that church was really useful for was giving sanctuary. And that's kind of obvious, right? So Owen Wilkerson was one of the people who was interviewed, and he was talking about the rifts that happen between the new migrants and the old migrants. And again, y'all might be familiar with that, even in your own personal experience. So people come from the South a little bit later on, and maybe the people who are more acclimated in Newark are kind of like, don't act so country, whatever, right? So he's talking about these rifts, but he says outside of the church, on the street and whatnot, or within a community, I think I had mentioned, we as kids, we sort of ostracized the kid who came from the South and whatnot because of his or her talk or his clothing. I really have a lot of respect for the Black church. So he really saw the church as a place where that kind of people kind of left that kind of stuff outside. And I just included an image of Amiri Baraka, or at this point, Leroy Jones' book, Blues People. He writes about this rift. And if you haven't read the book, again, obviously a Newark native, he tells the history of this country through Black music. And it is such a, in my opinion, beautifully written book and such a smart way to tell American history through Black music. So I highly recommend it. Just want to throw it up on the screen. So Sunday wasn't just about church. And again, there's all sorts of church stories and not church stories and why people went to church and why they didn't and why they stopped in the book. And they're just great, great, valuable interviews. So music was big on Sundays, whether it was after church or at night or other days or on the radio. One of Willie Bradwell was interviewed, and she was just remembering Laurel Gardens, which probably some of you remember, maybe even went to. She said Laurel Gardens used to have, Ronnie Williams used to sponsor their gospel shows, and everybody came. That's the first place I saw Aretha Franklin. Every Sunday, practically, we were in Laurel Gardens for a gospel show. Can you imagine seeing Aretha Franklin for the first time, just be sitting there? wow. Those few sentences to me are so much more valuable than me saying, and Aretha Franklin came to Newark, bleh. But this, wow. So a lot of people were really focused on emphasizing that they only listened to gospel, only went after church, right? So some people use the term politics of respectability. Whereas others had no problem saying, oh yeah, we were at the club Saturday night, we dressed, and you can read about that in all sorts of other books, Malcolm X's autobiography, for example. So again, 1,000 ways that people dealt with their music listening, concerts on the radio, et cetera, what they listened to, how they listened to it, who they went with, et cetera. So just beautiful stories about music. Because Newark, it was and is again a music hotspot. Uh, Again, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but it's so important to know so many of those important Newark artists, New York artists were coming to Newark, vice versa. Okay, so Sunday was also about baseball, the Newark Eagles. I get so frustrated when people, kind of the Negro Leagues is a little bit more, people talk about it, when people are a little more aware. And yet, for some reason, we're not talking about the Newark Eagles, who actually won the World Series. So, where are they in the conversation? So James Churchman, founder of the original Churchman Funeral Home, a funeral home that's still providing homegoing services to Newarkers today, was remembering the Eagles. And there's so many great stories about them in there. So he said, oh, I used to swear by the Newark Eagles. I used to go to the game. The thing that bothered me the most is they used to have opening day on Mother's Day. But my mother would go to church and she'd say, I know you want to go to the ball game, so you go ahead. And I can remember Mule Suttles and Ray Dandridge of the ball players. I remember when Larry Doby was playing with the Newark Eagles, because Larry and I trained high school sorry, I can't read that far away. Finished high school the same year. I guess I could look up here. Newark's own Larry Doby happened to be the second African American to break baseball's color barrier when he joined the American League in 1947. Exactly. But do we talk about that? I think I have to wait for questions after or corrections. Amazing. See, this is why we're here, because we're going to hear those stories. Thank you. Yeah. So this is, but you know why? Because he's from Newark. This is my pet peeve. So anyway, so cool, right? So I just wanted us to know that. And there's all sorts of other great it's just gonna, I think a lot of us are a lot of you. I'm not a Newarker. I just spent a lot of time here. So let me not try to claim a city that is not mine, because that's not right. But I think a lot of us are really proud of this city, and this book is just an affirmation of why we should be. Okay, work days, next chapter. So domestic work was obviously, there's chairs right up here. Now, you know how I work. Yeah, why are you sitting over there? You can't even see the pictures. Thank you. We have time. Got all these chairs. So good to see you. Okay, so work days. Yes. When a lot of African Americans came to Newark and other places from the South, especially in the early 20th century, domestic work, service work in different ways was some of the only opportunities. But let's not get it twisted. There were lots of other folks doing lots of other jobs. But that was domestic work is discussed a lot in these oral histories. So Marzelle Swain was interviewed, and she said, that was the only job I could get until I was working for a lady. And she said, how far did you go in school? So I told her, and she said, what are you doing domestic work? She said, you got an education, you should not be doing domestic work. So then she tried to help me get into a store, and she still couldn't help me. Some friends she knew, they wouldn't touch you. So she graduated from high school, Mrs. Swain, And that was an accomplishment back then, not just for Black folk, but for a lot of people. It wasn't easy for a lot of reasons. A lot of folks were working. So her employer tried, but her white friends weren't interested in hiring her at the store. So factory work was obviously another big job, especially as the century moved on. And Newark was this huge industrial site. I think most of us know. I know when I learned about the Industrial Revolution, nobody talked about Newark, and yet there it was, just creating and manufacturing all sorts of different things. So the factory jobs were harder to get for African Americans because they were more lucrative, and they were harder to keep those jobs for a number of reasons. In fact, even during shortages, during wartime especially, when so many white workers went off to war, and immigrants would sometimes go back to their home countries to fight, there would be more openings for Black folk and women in factories, sometimes for the first time. And yet, some of these companies would have preferred to not have anybody there than to have Black folk or women. But there's a lot of discussion about factories. So Willie Bradwell talks about in her interview, they didn't even hire Black people till after the war. So when we went in there after the war, it wasn't too much of a problem. So yeah. You can just move my jacket there if you want to sit in the front. Okay. Yeah, this is I need this to be kind of a casual thing. I'm not lecturing. I don't lecture in class either. I just, I can't keep track of lecturing. Okay, but like I said, not everybody was doing domestic work, doing quote unquote unskilled work. So how can we not talk about Mildred Crump, may she rest in peace and power, this like dynamic person of Newark. So she came to Newark from Detroit, actually, in 1965. So a number of these oral histories were also done around folks who either had been in Newark for a generation or had come from other, a lot of times of the Great Migration, people would leave the South and, we were just talking, just shared the story about, Dale, just about the grandmother who they stop somewhere, then they go here. So people were in Pittsburgh, they go to Newark, Detroit, go to Newark. So Mrs. Crump was incredibly educated, and I'm going to try to read this out loud. I just think it's really important to read these words out loud, but it's even better when you listen to them and their own voices. So she says here again, this was one of those incidents, a promise that was made sight unseen. And I mean, at that time, I was the first African-American Braille teacher in the city of Detroit. And Dr. Kelly in New Jersey was not expecting a Black person. I know that. But when I walked into his office to say, hi, here I am, he tried to fake. So what he did is he said to me, if you will work for Jersey City in another capacity, and while we find funding for this position, all of a sudden they lost their funding for the directorship. And he said, we'll fix it up for you, don't worry. So she, she did her time, and then she moved on, and we all know that the rest is literal history, right? So. But she tells some amazing stories about how hard it was just being a Black woman driving around outside of Newark into some cities where kids were just like standing on the street throwing stuff at her. This was not that long ago. So last chapter, hot days. This is question 81. The questionnaire has 80, oh gosh, I'm going to forget. Almost 90 questions on this questionnaire. So we're getting towards the end when they are asked, what would you consider to be the 5 most important events, developments that have occurred in Newark during your residence here, e.g. strike, election, riot, fire, natural disaster, Black in-migration? So I always wonder, and I would have loved to ask Dr. Price, if he used the word riot on purpose as opposed to riots, because I think all of us know the minute you say riots in Newark, we have there's an image of one event. But there were other uprisings and rallies and so forth. So I'll never know that, just something I wonder. So I leave this subject for last for many reasons. So first I talk about fire. Fire in urban spaces, especially in through the first half of the up through the first half of the 20th century, was just something people lived with. It was pretty common, such that you'd hear in an interview somebody say, "Oh man, I would love to show you my photo album, but I lost it in a fire." Like they had said, "Boy, it sure is windy outside." Uh, Fire is talked about in terms of Christmas. They put little candles on trees, and then trees would like light up. There are these kerosene stoves. Now, these are usually based on the lives of people working for folks who didn't have a lot of space, who were in tenements sometimes. So fire was quite a common occurrence, and how it was addressed was not always as efficient as it could have been. And honestly, still today, we see that the issues of fire happening in more crowded urban spaces is still occurring. So the life of fire is very interesting. I've done some presentations on just the way that fire stays in our memories. And one interview that, one of the many interviews that was fabulous, was with Coit Jones, who happens to be Amiri Baraka's father, the grandfather of Mayor Baraka. Mr. Jones was reminiscing and being asked about when he first came to Newark. He came from South Carolina in 1927 at age 11, which is not uncommon. The family gets you on the train and says, "You're going to go stay with Auntie Joan, Uncle, whatever." So there he is. He says, "The only one thing I can remember about that ride in the taxi from the train station was the amount of people that crossed the street at Broad and Market. I had never seen that many people before. Like I said, small town in South Carolina." So Mrs. Blount, who's interviewing him, says, "Were they African Americans or were they?" And Jones says, "They were people mostly white, I think." This was years ago, remember? "I asked the taxi driver if there was a fire someplace. Where was all the people going?" And so then that got me thinking, and this is what happens when you're just listening to these stories all over. After this story, the interviewer, Mrs. Blount, says, "Now you wanted to tell another story." And he tells a story about being a young child back in South Carolina at around age 5 and witnessing the results of a fire that left he saw a woman's body holding a baby. Yeah. And I wondered if that memory of fire was with him in the taxi as he's coming to Newark, and maybe he's thinking, what have I gotten myself into? So these are things you can kind of wonder as you listen, almost having conversations with them, at least in your mind. But obviously I'll never know, and I certainly am not going to surmise, because that is not my prerogative. So finally, we get to the uprising rebellion. Some folks call it riots. I don't, for all sorts of reasons. I talk about that a little bit in the book. So Ella Rainey was talking about that time in July of '67, and she says, "Because I remember standing at my window and watching all these white fellows coming from that side of Bloomfield Avenue, and we didn't know what they were going to do. But luckily, we didn't get that burning and all that stuff that went with the other riot business across town. But it was a frightening time." So these riots are an obsession around Newark. I don't find in Newark so much, but when people talk about Newark, it's like it's just connected in some way. So I think some people have asked me, what am I most surprised by, or what did I learn? The biggest surprise I had was the myriad experiences that people in Newark had during those days of the uprising, because it was really different for everybody. And again, I might be preaching to the choir. You know the stories, maybe you were there. But not everybody had the same experience, saw the same thing, et cetera, et cetera. One person said, well, if I hadn't been so busy working, I'd probably be able to tell you something about it. And it almost offended, like, some of us have lives. So it was a really different kind of approaches to thinking about this event. And it's just really important that it's not all the same. So one of my I keep saying these are my favorites, but these people all are just so special. So this is an interview with Zandria Mapson May. So this is between her and her son, Bill May Jr. She was married to Bill May Sr., a photographer who took so many photographs of Newark. Those are the photographs that were featured on the beautiful Newark History Society flyer that they put together. And those are all in this library. And you want to learn Newark, just go look at the Bill May collection and you're good to go. So this is an interview between wife and mother and son. And well, she says, I do remember the riots, and I remember the exact date because it was my younger brother's birthday, July 13, 1967. And I was working at the Springfield Branch Library, and the library closed early so that the employees could go home. And I remember getting a ride home, and getting home, I remember seeing the National Guard. On my way home, I remember hearing gunshots. I remember that it was kind of a scary time for me. So her son says, because remember, these are peer interviews. So, and this wouldn't happen if it was a scholar or some community activist. So her son says, now, the library in which you worked was actually on Hay Street. The start of the riot was actually between where you worked and home. So you had to basically go through the riot area to get home. Ordinarily, you would have taken a bus and you would have gone perhaps right across Belmont Avenue past the 17th Avenue projects. So obviously the son was paying attention to how his mom got home from work, right? And what I think is pretty important to remember is that for some folks, the rebellion didn't even start on the 12th. They didn't even know anything was going on at the police precinct because they were somewhere else. Newark's a big city, in case we haven't noticed. So people were unaware of events that even occurred that day, and so it had not spread yet. And by the way, because we all know that all roads lead to Newark, the ride that she received, she references, from a fellow church member was a Mr. Brewster. He ultimately became the pastor at First Baptist Church of Madison, New Jersey, where I belonged for many years, where some of us in the room went. Unfortunately, I never met him. He had passed by the time I joined the church. But his wife, Mrs. Brewster, and I were best friends. We just talked on the phone the other day. So as you can see, it's all about Newark all the time. So we're still talking about the rebellion. Catherine Bethia had this to say. And one of the things they gave the impression, you were asking before about people's impression of Newark, the media gave people the impression that every Black person in every part of Newark was on fire. Part of that was because of the way they showed usually the pictures of the same area, pretending it was, not really stating that, pretending it was another part of Newark. All of Newark was not burning down, you know that. Again, she's talking to someone she knows, so she's like, you know it wasn't burning down. So people who were not even close to Newark were reporting about this, and this happens a lot, and there's a film that I kind of rake over the coals in the book, if you want to look at it, that does what I think is the same thing, is talk about this thing from far, far away, and they don't know what they're talking about. It would have been so neat if somebody had asked the folks who actually lived here what was happening and what happened and how they felt about it. So one of the things that I think is really important in talking about past history is contextualizing it somehow to what's happening today. Not because it's not important what happened in the past, but it's so valuable for us to understand what's going on now through the past. So whether I'm teaching or writing, I like to give some kind of relevance. So I wanted to share what this journalist wrote many years later after this 1997 interview that an ordinary person commented on about how the media manipulates. So this is following Freddie Gray's eventual death in Baltimore. So Jack Schaefer was writing for Politico magazine in 2015, and he wrote that riots are particularly complicated for the media to cover. TV's preferred presentation of any riot is the five-shot, and who can object, live shot, I'm sorry, and who can object to that? But its next favorite is montage, the stacking of ghastly image upon ghastly image, of looted pharmacy upon burning senior center, upon flaming automobile, which it can run in a loop. Not to diminish the horrors of the Baltimore riots, but looping of the Baltimore news makes it look as if the entire city is ablaze and scores have died, even though damage is localized and a human life has yet to be taken. So again, this keeps happening. Okay, I'm sure you've experienced, read it. It just keeps happening. People reporting things that aren't happening because it gets clicks, views, etc. The people who are living it get left out. So narratives around the rebellion have become entrenched. And as far away as we get from it, it seems like there's always something kind of pulling us back. And a lot of folks talk about that in terms of what people think about Newark, talking about traveling to different countries and people asking, oh, do your kids go to school? You know, it's just, yeah, it's frustrating. So Danita Henderson said in her interview, anywhere you go, you say you're from Newark, and people say, oh, they think of that riot they had there 30 years ago, that it's still like that. That's all you have there. It's the media that puts it out there, all this negativity. So, you know, we feel it today. They felt it in the 90s. They've been feeling it. It just continues to happen, especially when the reporting, the media, in my opinion, are talking about Black and brown communities. This image I have here is a 2024 image from a moving company advertisement. And the first thing they do in their ad is try to dispel the negative stereotypes of Newark, and they talk about the crime rate, and they're like, actually, it's really not that bad. So you can see that they have already bought into the narrative that, ooh, Newark, bad, and we're going to try to tell people who are moving that they should move to Newark because it's not as bad as everybody says. So it's really powerful how narratives get entrenched. Okay, almost done, my friends. Louise Epperson's interview. So she's a hero. She needs a book all to herself. Some of you are probably familiar with her. But basically, in the midst of her and others fighting an eminent domain act by the New Jersey Dental School, the rebellion broke out. And this might be a suggestion that protest works sometimes. I don't want to, you know, but when I started the fight with the med school, she says, I tried to get everybody in the city and the state and the county and the federal government to help me. I went to everybody. Everybody gave me the runaround to go to this one and go to that one. I had contacted everyone that I possibly could in higher upper powers. Then the riot broke out. Everybody that I tried to contact before this happened, everyone, including the governor, they all came to my door to see what they could do to sit down for a community meeting in the city of Newark. So she was like, you know, not for nothing, but finally she got some action. So not trying to be incendiary, but I just want that narrative that, you know, uprisings, rebellions, rallies, protests, what have you, are always bad. They affect change. Like it or not, they affect change. And you can look at history about that. I mean, we love the civil rights uprisings, but for some reason, now that these are closer, not so much. So really, what I want to say is I just want these stories to get out. You get to listen to them. You can listen to them and listen to them a million times and hear something new every time. And so whether it's oral histories, public letters, court transcripts, it's so important. We call ourselves public historians, those of us who are, actually want people to access these narratives. So we're trying to make it public. As I love this quote from John Edgar Wideman from Slave Road, he says, "The stories that belong to us, if we share them with each other, with the world, no one can unsay them." I want to say also that the stories we hear are those people who persevered, who survived. If we live in Newark, if we walk around Newark, there are people struggling. There are people living on the streets. Not everybody who made it through the Great Migration survived, because it was hard for a million different reasons. And so I guess I just want to make sure we understand that there are a whole bunch of other experiences that aren't even told in these 107 interviews, right? And those are stories, unfortunately, we might never hear. And that's why I believe it's really important to speak to those who are unhoused, housing insecure. Those folks have stories too. They have lives, and they deserve agency the way any other human being does. So, thank you.
Any questions?
Should I stay up here?
Hello, Professor Singer. Thank you
Hello.
for being here. This is so enlightening, to say the least. First thing that came to my mind is, and please don't be offended, because I don't mean to, you're not a person of African American descent.
That's right.
What made you, why did you become so fascinated, other than attending Newark, graduate school here in Newark and being here, but what made you, I suppose, fall in love, if that's the right term? You just became entrenched with this subject of Newark and the people that make up the city. So where did all that come from? And where, I know you want to digitize and you want to do a lot of things with this. We need to talk, because I got an idea. Where are you going with this? You're in LA, so you're doing something similar out in LA. So what are your plans or hopes for the city of Newark?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. When I teach African American studies courses quite often, and it's the elephant in the room to me, is that this white person is talking about Black history. So I really appreciate the question. And I think there's so many answers. I think there are many answers. One of my answers that I give started when I started teaching college, which again, wasn't until my 40s. I'm a late bloomer, remember? And I was teaching writing classes, and I just was taken aback by how there were no writers of color in these classes, like these anthologies we teach. What is going on here? And it was just this sort of wake-up call to me that in academia, generalizing, it seemed to be a real lack of voices, of Black voices. So I think that I did a lot of things at the university that I was working at to try to rectify that. So when I came to Newark and I started hearing these stories, I'm like, oh my God, once again, Black voices buried, Black voices erased, Black voices not heard. And so that really irks me. And yeah, and I am a white person, and it's just how it feels. Really, I just don't like people's voices being ignored in this country that is made by the people who are telling these stories. So it just seems unfair. Thanks. And then what am I? Yeah, what are my plans for Newark? I mean, people are doing Newark without me. The city doesn't need me per se. On the other hand, this book is both an ode to Newark and a wake-up call to this country about the centrality of Newark's history and our country's history. So I'll always be talking about Newark in whatever I teach, whatever I write about. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
thing I learned, one thing I learned about Newark is Newark has always been a powerhouse amongst the tri-state area and abroad. New Jersey as a whole, we're the Garden State. When they was in migration, went in different directions. Some of the people that was up here migrated down south, from down south up here to the Midwest and all that. Um, m- my experience of just being a human being, some people get angry at me, but I'm of mixed ethnicity. I'm a mixed culture, mixed people. My grandfather was Scottish German, grandmother, she was Native American and some mixed. So when I look at it, I see it as a human experience. Because I grew up with Italian people, the Castellanos, Stigliones, a lot of rockers, Joe Pesci family I grew up with. I grew up with some of the Goldsteins. I grew up on one of the greatest junior Olympic gymnast teams of all time, Flip City. Newark was, like you say, was a powerhouse when it comes to music. Zanzibar, Sensations, and so many other clubs. And our industry was vast. Patent Leather was stationed here. Westinghouse, and then we got Prudential. We have all these big industries, and Newark was they call the gateway city. Penn Station. You know what I'm saying? If anyone want to look at how Penn Station looked, when they first built it up, in this library and everything. I've been coming here since I was 8 by myself. And some of the you go to look at some of the hotels and around Newark. Newark was a powerhouse. Matter of fact, Newark is still a powerhouse.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Matter of fact, the tri-state area cannot do without Newark.
I
You know what I'm
agree.
saying? So many great people came up here, like you say, the Krugers and
Mhm.
some of the biggest manufacturers of beer products lived here.
Yep.
You
And you bring up a really
the
good,
garment industry, which was down in the ironbound section,
That's right.
So yes,
well, and
Yeah.
what,
okay.
but
So I
it's-
just want to let everybody know that Newark is a powerhouse then and now.
thank you for that. And also thank you for reminding us, not everybody in the interviews, were all, had two African-American parents. And so there is a lot of interesting talk about race. And remember, this was like, they're talking about the early half of the 20th century. People thought a lot of different things about mixed race folks. So there's some interesting conversation. So it's a good point. Sir.
Okay, I'm glad to meet you. I came here to do something else, but then you showed up.
Story of my life.
I gotta say something for you. Gotta say something. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
You're more than qualified if you're white to talk about Black history and talk about Newark. Let's remember, because I'm 74 years old. I was born and raised in Newark, born in 1950. December 25th, 1950. I experienced the Newark riot. Okay? It came off. I went to Speedway, I went to Vailsburg High School and was in the Speedway elementary school playground playing basketball. You had to play ball back in the day. You couldn't survive in this town. You had to have a jump shot. Okay? Now, Newark was predominantly white. In 1967, Newark was overwhelmingly predominantly white. The white flight happened after the riots. Okay, so, and there were white people, there are many neighborhoods that were mixed, okay, all over Newark. And anybody here ever hear of a guy named Tom Hayden? Okay, he wrote a book on Newark. Did you ever read the book, Professor?
Yes.
Okay, called The Rebellion in Newark. He was the first person to stop calling the Newark riots a riot.
Okay.
He called it Rebellion in Newark. he was more than qualified because he came to town and he organized black people to elect the first black elected official, was George Richardson, state senator. Tom Hayden helped get him elected.
So in all these things you say, you know that I know you know that there are
Mhm.
some
No, he
people
was
who want to say something different. So, but thank you for that. And I just, yeah, so that's why these conversations are so important. White flight, super complicated, because the fact is, our country was doing a lot of things to bring, so white people weren't just leaving, they were being invited to go live other places with great mortgages, new neighborhoods being built. So it wasn't just like they went, ooh, you know, so it's always more complicated. But yes, I appreciate that. And this is why, you know, you're in Newark, because you're going to hear stories. That's how we work. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for coming.
Is it on?
I just wanted to mention the fact that Newark is known for having, it used to have rich soil here, whereas they had fresh water where they had built the majority of the beer companies like Krueger and Valentine, you know, Krueger, because Newark have a lot of happening. I don't want anyone to forget about Newark. When folks ask me, when they say Newark, like you say, they'll say, Newark, oh my God. What do you mean, oh my God? We have major, everything major was here. Not only we had Bell Telephone, we have Newark Airport, and you still have to come through us. We have Newark Library, you know what I'm saying? We have cathedrals here. So I never let anyone say anything negative about Newark. I say, because we still have Newark Penn Station. You have to hit us before you get anywhere else. You know
That's
what I'm
right.
saying? So, so it's a lot of things. We was known as a bank state because we had all the major banks here. If anybody remember, you know, I think my mother, she did start me with 50 cents, I think, a week that we have to have at our first banks here in Newark. Yeah, so you know what? So we have a lot of history here. So never let anyone talk negative about the city when you come here and you take over our city and still buying our land. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to read something that was in the chat. It was,
There's people
says,
online.
say, okay, so now I'm crying. Says, she posted this when you were telling one of your stories from the book.
Oh, I made somebody
I
cry.
cannot wait to get my hands on this book.
Oh.
My mother's was one of the few tapes that was actually transcribed, but there was so much missing when I received it. I hope that those tapes were not missing. Having this conversation with my mother was the most comprehensive conversation we had ever had.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Do you mind if I just choose somebody to ask a question here? Because this young person over here, just a really special person to me, like you all are, but she was a student of mine a long time ago.
Oh, I feel like I'm gonna cry because when you were crying before, we were doing it through Zoom as we were looking for parking. So we've been involved from the beginning. But I just wanted to say, well, I'm so proud of you and so blessed to know you and get to consider you like a part of my family. And I think this book's amazing. So I'm here with my AP African American Studies class. Yeah, I teach at Hackensack High School. And we were super excited to come out. And I had a question, but they also have questions as well. So part of the exam is they have to do a research project and create a thesis and a claim. And I'm trying to help prepare them and do that. So one of the questions I had is, what resources or archives would you recommend for students wanting to dig deeper in research of these type of topics?
Great question. And so then I get to shout out the library again. So whether you go online or come to the New Jersey room, one floor up, right? Am I correct? The New Jersey room, oh my God, it's just a treasure trove of articles, photographs, et cetera, on Newark. They have a great digital collection. Now, the city archives are also a super fun place. I did some work in there, organizing some college students to help put the archives in order. I don't know what the accessibility to city archives is right now, but that's an amazing place. the oral histories themselves, just listening to them, because see, another great thing about oral histories, reason 572 to listen to them, is they point you in directions. You're like, wait, what? I found a book that a woman, one of the first members of Bethany Baptist Church, had written because her son mentioned it in the oral history. And I finally found like somebody had copied it, taken photos of it. It's in the book. And it talks about the earliest days of, not the earliest days of Newark, you know, Robert Treat early days, but Bethany Baptist Church early days. So if you listen to the oral histories, they tell you to go find things. Yeah. Great question. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, good, thank you.
So my question was, how did the Newark riot influence the civil rights movement in the United States?
How did the Newark riots influence the civil rights movement in the United States? I mean, you know, the let me not do a lecture, especially because you'll probably know, but the civil rights movement, sometimes it gets taught, and you know how it gets taught, it's like somebody, Dr. King, protest, bus boycott, yay, Civil Rights Act. But there's something that historians call the long civil rights movement. And so I would say it was part of the civil rights movement, as so many of these 1960s urban rebellions were. Things were not, you know, the way it gets taught, it looks like everything got wrapped up in a bow and everything was cool after that. And obviously that was not the case. So these uprisings all happened because of a last straw. And that's something I write about. These uprisings, and one reason some of us don't like to call them riots, because a riot sounds like it's some kind of like, you know, spontaneous, oh, hey, no. It's because they have finally had enough with this last, you know, police violence. It's oftentimes what it is, some kind of law enforcement issue. So, so I guess I would say that these rebellions across the country and in Newark were part of the long civil rights movement. Yeah, and some other people might answer different. I think so. Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to,
That's okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a great addition. I mean, there's just so much knowledge in the room. I don't know what time the library closes, but
yeah, I just wanted to say, it's not a question, it's like a statement.
go ahead.
Because, you know, when you like look at the whole overall history, like history puts it as the struggles. It's always negative, 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 negative. Today, you know, was a good day, you know. It was different, it was unique. It was, you know, it touched bases with positive views and situation. I would just like to commend that. And this is a new thing for me to try to get into, what are the actual stories of the past, you know what I mean? The good times, as opposed to the struggle. You know what I'm saying?
I appreciate that.
All right.
And that's exactly, thank you. That's what this book is about. It's like, like you're saying, don't act like some city, for all the cities in this country, this city for some reason doesn't have people just living beautiful lives, doing beautiful things. And like every city, there was some ugly stuff. But yeah, this is about real life. You got that right. But all these, uh, I concur. So listen to those stories in Krueger-Scott. Yeah, and you'll hear that. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hi.
I have two questions, two small questions. One being, what is the greatest thing you think I should take from your speech today? I heard a lot of great things. I just wanted to know, like, I heard a lot of amazing things. What's the one thing that should stick with me?
Every time somebody teaches you something, ask where that information came from and whose information that actually is.
My second question is, what is the thing that you remember Newark for? What is the biggest and greatest thing you will always remember Newark for?
Don't you did? Oh, you weren't here in the beginning while you saw me on Zoom. Don't make me cry again. Oh, ah, um, Somebody else want to say what they remember Newark for? So I'm in LA now, and I love it there, by the way. Don't get me wrong, because I like that sunshine and palm tree situation. But what Newark, people in Newark, they know who they are. And there's a lot, people, you got to prove yourself. And you can't prove yourself by trying to prove yourself. You just got to do your time, show yourself, and they will decide, they will let you know if they're going to listen to you, if you're okay. And that's what I like. No tea for the fever in Newark. That's what I like.
Newark knows whose it is, right?
Say it again.
Newark knows who we are.
That's it. Yes. No, yes. That's what I love.
Any other questions? Beautiful.
So much about coming to Newark. Did they tell stories about trips back down south to
Mm.
see families and what that meant to them or what they took with them? I can remember Mildred Crump, I think, talking about packing food for the trip and that sort of thing. Does
You
that
know-
come out in these oral histories?
That's a really great question because no, and not much, and mostly because there's not a question on the questionnaire that asks about going back. And now I need to make sure I'm correct when I say that. So there wasn't a lot of discussion. There were questions about, have you thought about going back? Do you want to go back? At the end, they ask a question, which is if you had it to do all over again, would you still be in Newark? And almost to a person, they say, yeah. One or two said, well, I really thought I was going to go back to North Carolina. It just never happened. But no, there's not a lot there because it wasn't kind of a focused point.
Why don't we all thank Katie Singer for such a great presentation
Thank you.
and thank you all for your questions. Yeah, and there's a few books for sale if anyone wants to buy a book or just talk informally. I don't know if there's any food back there, Tom. I think we cleaned it out pretty well. Yeah.
So there's a couple books.
Okay, there's a few crackers. Yeah.
There are a couple books left, and then I also have postcards just with information about it if you just want to look it up or whatever, order it later or not order it, share it. It's up to you. But please listen to the oral histories. Just go when you have some time, if you have access to the intranet, and listen to oral history, Krueger-Scott oral histories. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much.